You wrote about Sam Darnold in
Yeah.
your takeaways today, which people can read on the brand new redesigned SI.com, which I encourage everybody to take a look at. Very cool. It is, I like the fact that it is essentially a 1-year contract,
Mhm.
but
It's
there's a built-in upside. Like if he performs the way that they want to, like the Seahawks really protected themselves well on this, but I think that the runway is there for Sam to go cook and win this thing.
Yeah, I mean, it can get maybe worth up to $111 million. There are early vesting dates too, which I won't, like I know people get bored by the contract stuff, but basically what it means is they got to make a decision on whether or not they're keeping him in February of next year. So, if they don't wind up keeping him, then he gets to the market earlier than everybody else. And really, I think for Sam, and I talked to Sam last week, um, the big thing for him was finding a place where he could go and be a multi-year starter. And that's where Minnesota wasn't willing to go with him. And that's where Pittsburgh wasn't willing to go with him. Like Pittsburgh was a more serious suitor in this whole thing than I think a lot of people realize. They really like Sam. But I think the idea of I can go and do what Baker Mayfield did. I can be, like the reclamation project turned at least high-end bridge, like at least Alex Smith in Kansas City. Like that's what he was looking for.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great, like, and this is something that's in the story too. Uh Jordan Palmer made a really interesting analogy with me. And Jordan Palmer's been training Sam since high school.
Yep.
And he made this analogy to me. He said, like, it's, if you look at a guy who, say you have a billionaire and he's got to allocate, $300 million, you got to do something with it. He's like, is that guy who's already made his money, is he going to go find a distressed asset to put all that money in, or is he going to put it in a startup? He's like, he's going to put it in a distressed asset 9 times out of 10. So like, why is it that these guys, these billionaires who've made all this money, keep investing in startups over distressed assets? He's like, it doesn't make sense. And what often happens is a startup is plugged into a bad situation and it doesn't take off because that bad situation doesn't support it taking off. If you take the distressed asset and you plug it into a good situation, you've got a much better chance. And I think Seattle, now they still got some work to do. The interior of their offensive line, that's a huge part of the equation for them, and what the way they look. I think, in September in that area is going to be different than the way they look right now. But I think that's a pretty good situation for Sam Darnold. You got Cooper Kupp there now with Jackson Smith and Jigba, a good offensive coach in Clint Kubiak. I really like that situation. And I think at the very least, right, I think Sam's going to be able to give them a good level of play that at least buys them time to find the next guy. Like they don't have to force it now, which I think is a pretty powerful thing.
Well, Darnold will be in Pittsburgh next year. Don't. No, I'm just kidding. I think that
Can't rule anything out. I
you
mean,
can't rule anything out at this point. But I thought the entire, again, I tend to give more credit to the Jets, to the Seahawks,
Yeah.
in some degree to the Raiders. Just less so because Tom Brady's there. That guy doesn't need more credit for anything. But the fact that he's not sitting, these teams aren't sitting around waiting at this point, and they got someone. You know what I
Yep.
mean? They got someone, and especially the Jets and the Seahawks, where you got these guys still with some upside on really good deals that you can get out of if they're not performing.
Right.
And like how, and I guess that traces back to
Well,
my question before, is like, how didn't all these other really good teams manage to
so
do that? You know what I mean?
like that's the thing is like we're all, and we talk about being like a product of our experiences, right? Like when we just went through that, and like talking about the Aaron Rodgers thing. Well, think about Aaron Glenn and where he came from, right?
Yeah.
Who the hell would have thought, like, I'm just talking about even people in the Lions organization, who would have thought 4 years ago that Jared Goff would still be the quarterback there now?
Mm-hmm.
And not only still be the quarterback there, but be there on a new deal. Like everyone except for maybe Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell viewed Jared Goff, his inclusion in that Stafford trade, as a salary dump. But you know what? it's a kid who was drafted first overall, had talent. You don't get drafted that high if you don't have talent. He'd been to a Super Bowl. Now, this is different than Justin Fields and Sam Darnold, obviously, but there was something to work with there talent-wise, and they stuck with him and they gave him a good situation, and look what it's become, So, like, I'm not saying that automatically is going to happen with Sam Darnold or Justin Fields, but again, like, the idea of the distressed asset, like, I mean, is Cam Ward like? Why is Cam Ward more likely to make it than Justin Fields?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, why? Like, what makes you think that? Because, I mean, do NFL teams think as highly of Cam Ward now than they thought of Justin Fields in 2021? I think, in a lot of cases, no. So, like, you're taking a guy of similar talent and you're not committing to him. He's not going to prevent you from taking one next year or the year after that. If you want to take Garrett Nussmeier or Drew Aller, or maybe in 2027, Conor Arch Manning. That look on your face.
I mean, I'm sure he's going to be
You knew I had to
great.
slide that one in there.
Yeah, right into the conveyor belt to the Hall of Fame.
But why? You know what I mean? Like, why are we so convinced? Why would you be so convinced that Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders would be more likely to make it than Justin Fields or Sam Darnold?
So here's what's interesting to me, right? And I wrote this the other day. So I think that teams are telling us exactly what they think of this year's quarterback class, right? The Giants, they have the number 3 pick. They've been in on Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Matt Stafford, and Jimmy Garoppolo. The Raiders, number 6 pick, immediately traded for Geno Smith. The Jets at number 7 immediately signed Justin Fields. The Saints at number 9 didn't move on from Derek Carr. Like, you go all the way back to all these teams in the order, and you're like, oh, okay, this team might need a quarterback. This team might need a quarterback. The only team that we haven't heard in the discussion for a lot of these other veteran guys is the Titans. Is the Titans at 1, but they have Will Levis also, right? And now that would be an unmitigated disaster if they decided to take like Abdul Carter and start Will Levis. Like, I think they have to take a quarterback here. But none of these other teams, I feel like, are sitting around and waiting for a rookie to change their fortunes at this point.
Right. And I just think that's where you are. You know what I mean? Like, that's the makeup of the class. And I'm sure over the next month, people are going to talk themselves into Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders and Jackson Dart.
I think Shedeur Sanders is Teddy Bridgewater.
So you want to hear the comps I've heard on the top 2 guys? I wish I had one on Jackson Dart. I don't yet, but the comps I've heard on the 2 top guys are I heard Steve McNair for Cam Ward, which is really intriguing. Really intriguing. But I think part of it is like he's coming out raw, and you're going to have to. It might take some time, right? But there's talent there. And then with Shedeur Sanders, I heard Geno Smith.
Geno Smith, interesting. Okay.
Which isn't like, I don't think that's a terrible comparison. And I do think, like, again, like, I think we have to set our, and Geno's a really good NFL quarterback. You know what I mean? Like, so, it's not like that's not a shot at anybody. It's just, like the way some people see these things. And so I'm excited to dive into it, because I think it's going to be really fascinating seeing how, and we're off on a tangent here, but like how the presumed day 1 quarterbacks are compared with the presumed day 2 quarterbacks, right? So like you'd be talking your Quinn Ewers, your Tyler Shuck, your Jackson Dart, like that those types of guys.